I look at my 24-year-old young self, and I had no idea, like, I'm walking into this culture that not only accepts the sexual assault of female agents, it encourages it. And so we started to get, I think Karen and I started to get closer and realize we're the only ones we can trust. And so our weekend stopped becoming going out with, some of our male classmates and this and that, and ended up being mostly her and I, like going out to St. Simon's Beach and doing long runs in the rain and stuff like that, and just spending more time together and trying to stay away from our male classmates. I had gone to the G bar on campus to have a beer or two, um, and see how my Auburn Tigers had done the day before. Watch some sports highlights and have a burger and a couple beers. And so I was sitting at the bar, and he was sitting behind me in a booth with his roommates, his housemates, and they were drinking and whatever. And I remember he had come up beside me and said hi when he was getting a pitcher refill for their table, and I just said hi to him. He was not somebody that I normally talk to. He was just a very quiet man. And a very big man. He was like 6'4", 6'5", just really, really strong muscles, big guy. And I was done, and I think I had no more than 2 beers because I wasn't, like I said, I tried to watch my alcohol intake when I was on campus with my classmates. And I walked outside, and it was dark, and it was starting to get cold because it was October. And I remember I was feeling pretty good about myself because I was in the best shape of my life. And I probably stopped to light a cigarette, and he slid up next to me, and he's like, "Oh, I'll walk you home," because our condos or townhomes are all in the same little cul-de-sac area. And I just turned and looked at him, and I laughed, and I said, "Well, I do this all the time. I think I'm fine." And he goes, "Well, you never know." And I said, "You never know what?" And he said, "A woman shouldn't be walking alone in the middle of the night." And I just laughed at him, and I said, "I'm on a federal law enforcement academy facility. If I'm not safe here, I guess I'm not safe anywhere." And he laughed. He said, "Well, I'm going that way anyhow." And I'm like, "Okay." And I mean, we had a really nice stroll. It was a really nice evening, and the sky was clear, and I love that time of year because I really love, being from Alabama. I love American football and stuff, and being an Auburn graduate, it's kind of like in our blood. And I mean, we had to go, we had to go all the way across campus. And then there's this like little forest area where there's just a sidewalk that goes down, and it's like 2 condos over from where my place is, and we walk through there. So we're like walking through this pine forest, and the needles are starting to fall and cover the floor, and I mean, really tall pines. And we get to the back of my place, and he just suddenly stops talking, and he just pushes me against the red brick wall and starts sticking his tongue down my throat. And I'm trying to push him back, and I realize he's like, literally, he can pick me up with one hand. He's just so big. And I'm thinking, shit, this is it. This is what my mom warned me about. This is what they tell us all about. This is what the women were talking about. And like, I can still feel my leather jacket like catching on the bricks, how they're rough and stuff. At some point I made some kind of connection with him and with like my foot and stuff and into his groin, and he ended up backing up, and I remember him grabbing it as, holding himself and calling me a fucking bitch and a cunt. And I had tried to fight back. I remember punching him in the face. I'm right-handed. I remember punching him square on his cheek with my fist. And I was punching as hard as I could. And it made his head move a little bit, but he was just, and then he just smiled at me. It was like, it's like I had nowhere to go. And the thought of somebody being able to like have that much control over my body was just so terrifying. And it just, until it happens, you just think like you would be able to stop it, but you might as well be like, an 8-year-old child or something. There's just no way to stop it. And I ended up, eventually breaking free, and then I ended up in my room, which just has one of those, it's just a cheap door with like a little lock on the knob. So, I mean, it's not like he couldn't have just kicked the door open. I probably could have kicked the door open. And I just sat there with my back on my bed. I sat there with my back, excuse me, against the wall, just waiting for him to burst through. And of course, we don't have our guns on us. Our guns are kept at the armory. We don't have batons on us. We're still in training. There's nothing in my room that I could literally fight with. And then I realized he's not coming through. He's gone back home. And I remember looking outside my window, and I looked down at this little phone bank center. It's like Pentagon little building, and they have little payphones outside that I would use to call home. And I wanted to call home. I remember I wanted to go outside and call my mother, but my mother has never been there for me, and my father hasn't, so I knew that it was just not even worth sharing it with them. So I remember at some point I got brave enough to leave my room because I realized that I wasn't afraid of getting pregnant because I was on the pill, because I had messed up periods, but I was afraid of an STD or something. And so I ran to the bathroom and I just turned the water as hot as I could stand and tried to clean myself. And then I just went back to my room, and my mind is like, it's just going crazy. You're just like, what do I do? And then all your fucking training as a woman in this country is like jumping into your head like, did you have too much to drink? Did you lead him on? Maybe he thought you wanted it. Maybe it was your fault. It was just you two. It's a he said, she said, you know? And so I'm blaming myself. And then I'm like, but I wasn't drunk and I didn't lead him on and I told him I didn't need help. And then I thought maybe he'll just keep quiet about it. And if he kept quiet about it, maybe I could keep quiet about it and not say anything. I had gone through a lot of abuse as a child. I knew how to do that. I knew how to build walls in my mind and put trauma behind it so that I didn't have to focus on it, so that I didn't have to deal with it, and to focus on how to get through the academy and out to my station. And hopefully we wouldn't be assigned to the same station. And I remember thinking that I didn't want to file EEO because, number one, he's not my supervisor. EEO is not for that. This was a literal crime. It was a sexual assault. It was a rape. And I did not trust EEO simply because, number one, all of our advisors I was starting to go, wait a minute, this isn't safe. The system itself isn't safe. These guys, everything they've said, it's all starting to come together, a little bit to me, at least for not systemic across the whole Border Patrol, but at least in this academy, this is what I'm seeing. And seeing and thinking about all the women who've left in the middle of the night and this and that. And so I'm trying to figure out how to game the system to keep my job, trying to figure out how to get around their system so I can keep my job. I just did not want to go home. It was like, no, you can't go home. You have to stay here. You have to be tough. And then I look in the mirror in the morning as I'm putting on my green uniform and I see my black eye starting and my busted lip, and I can feel my ribs are like, I'm hoping they're not cracked. I know they're not broken, but I'm hoping they're not cracked. And I'm just like, ugh. And I pulled my hair back and put my cap on, and I didn't go to breakfast because I didn't want to see any of them. I just went to class, and because my last name starts with a B, I sat in the front row. And they all filed in, and I just stared straight ahead. And my instructor, all of a sudden realized, my law instructor, who Karen ends up dating, comes in, and he's looking right at me. And I'm waiting for him to be like, what the fuck happened to you? Who did this to her? And he looks at me, and he just looks away, and he keeps talking. And then when break comes, all my classmates go out into the foyer and are talking, which is unusual because some would go to the restroom, some would go get a soda or something or water, and then they return and sit around and gossip and talk, and nobody would come back in. So it was obvious that everybody knew and that he was telling everybody. But still, I never filed EEO. I didn't want to file EEO because, number one, they would start an investigation and I felt I would be targeted more and it would stop my training. It seemed like filing EEO stopped your training, and I just wanted to get out to my station. I felt that the Border Patrol would maybe try and fail him on something, his PT or so, which was ridiculous because he was in great shape and he was a fluent speaker. I compartmentalized, and I just kept pushing ahead as much as I as much as I could, and I just kept staring straight ahead and tried to keep my blinders and my ears plugged to all the things they were saying about me and the jokes and the laughing at me in the cafeteria and I just was like, I think I've always felt like an outsider in my own family, so I just felt like this is nothing different. I'll just prove how tough I am. And so that was my goal, just getting out of the academy and getting to my station and proving that I could be a good agent. And that became my focus. I don't, there's like so much that goes through your head after that I think people don't even contemplate, because there's a serious question now in my mind, like, I couldn't protect myself. I couldn't save myself from this man. How am I supposed to protect anybody else? And I'm wearing that badge and that gun. And so it creates not just all the trauma that something like that creates in you, but then just the self-doubt. And then for me, at least, I became even more reckless in my patrol duties at the station and trying to prove what a badass I was and how tough I was. And I was doing some shit that should have left me dead out there, just trying to prove how strong I was and everything. And ultimately, you learn as a female agent that it doesn't matter what you do. You're never a member of the Green family unless you're willing to cover up for all the bad agents, like the man who sexually assaulted me. So yeah. So I think Karen and my law instructor were having discussions and between class, and they were like, I noticed she would talk to him from time to time, so I kind of thought maybe something was going on, but she hadn't said anything to me, so I didn't, push her about it. So I think there was some interest before my sexual assault happened, but I think she really pushed it to a physical relationship with him, or took it to that point, because so one night she came to my room and said, "Hey, come out to dinner with me." And I was like, I think it was like a Sunday or something, and I was like, no, I don't want to go out to dinner. I'm just going to stay here. And she was like, no, I need you to back me up. I'm meeting some of the guys for dinner and down at the mall or something. And I was like, I really don't want to do that. I don't want to go out. She's like, you have to back me up. And, and I knew what she meant after everything I'd been through. And I was like, all right. So I went down there, and we walk in, and there's my Spanish instructor and my law instructor, who I knew were both from El Paso, and they were like BFFs. And I go, Karen, dude, I don't want to eat here. My instructors are here. And she goes, I know, they're who we're meeting. I'm like, what? And so I call her back outside, and I'm like, I don't want to be known as the woman who got her badge because she put out, which is so funny after what has happened to me. It was funny now, but back then it wasn't funny. But it's ironic because of what had happened to me, and I'm still not grasping the whole concept, and it would take years to grasp the systemicness of it. And she looks at me and she's like, yeah, like, Jen, not all of us have a 4-year degree like you do, and one with honors and all that stuff, which allows me further access to higher education. And she said, she was really fired up. She was like, I got a shit husband who beats me back home. I got three worthless, she said, three worthless boys. And she didn't mean it like that, but they're young and they couldn't help her and stuff. And, you know, she's like, I don't want to happen to me what happened to you. She says, if I date him, the others will leave me alone. And I said, you're right. And I think that for me, that was the first time. I think, so I have been judging the women who did intentionally date instructors as women who were just, is what the men had said, they're just trying to get their badge. They're trying to sleep their way through the academy. And I realized for the first time how judgmental and how short-sighted that is, that the reality is it's a form of protection. It brands you as a female. It in the Border Patrol, if somebody of a higher rank, and certainly even though he wasn't a supervisor, he was an actual agent versus our classmates. So that would tell the other instructors and tell the other agents to leave her alone, and they did. And so then the talks between Karen and I come around to more of, and this is the talk, our talks with the women once we graduated, our talks with the women behind us were like, look, your choice is to either have it taken from you violently or you give it up freely. That's your choice. And it's not to say that like Karen wouldn't have graduated. She was wicked smart. She's very physically fit. She's a very tough woman. Definitely one of the fierce 5%ers. Would have made it without having to do that, as I would have too, without having to be raped. And then we kind of really started to understand the honor first versus on her first. And so it's a survival method. It's a survival method to get your life together as a woman, as a professional, and to secure a life for you and your children and your future. That is what, you know, they call it hazing. That's what women in the Border Patrol have to go to. Am I saying that all women in the Border Patrol are raped or have to have sexual relations with their instructors? No, there are women that get through the academy without that happening. But there is not a single woman in the Border Patrol who has not suffered the wrath of not getting that detail because you won't put out, or not getting that promotion, excuse me, not getting that promotion, or not passing that class because a male instructor has decided that he's going to target you. That's just the truth. I think what's even more fucked up is that I've been talking about this for like, 5 or 6 years now. And nobody in Congress ever bothers to pick this up. They just had hearings, yesterday or the day before, and it's just like, nobody even asked about that. Nobody. And if you think what they're doing to female Border Patrol agents is bad, you'd imagine what they're doing to migrants and children.